is a number in Alberta. It is a Bell Mobility.
What about like telcos, like Deutsche Telekom and Belgacom and all the French Telecom? I don't even remember what it's called. What about all the government-run telcos over here? Are they even more restricted?
You don't get that information. Period.
You can't.
Just like classified, super secret.
They have no reason to give it out.
What I can say from knowing somebody actually over in Germany who's dealt with Deutsche Telekom, pretty much, and the generic term is PTT, is Post, Telegraph, and Telephony. Usually it's in most European, actually most countries other than the U.S., Canada, and I think maybe Mexico, though I can't say. Most of the stuff is still government monopoly. And they treat this stuff like it's more than nuclear classified. Getting information out of them, getting them to even install a phone line is very, very difficult. I remember in one instance he was saying, oh yeah, I just had 3 ISDN BRIs dropped in my office. I don't know what the numbers are. They just I ordered them, they showed up and installed them, and they won't give me my own phone numbers when I call them up, because I can't validate that I'm a customer because I don't have my phone number. So if you can imagine the worst government bureaucracies, like think about the IRS before, I don't know, one would say the reforms didn't happen, but think the worst of the IRS applied to your phone bill.
Yeah, and the thing about BRI that makes this really suck is that generally your SPIDs are based on your actual phone numbers. So if you don't have that information, you can't connect the switch and turn the lines up in order to call someone and have them read it off their caller ID. A SPID is a, God, I can't remember the actual acronym it stands for.
Yep.
Yeah, Service Profile Identifier. And basically, it's an internal numbering thing for the switch. You say, I am SPID so-and-so, and it goes, cool, well, I have this DID and this DID and this DID for you. I'm going to direct traffic your direction for these numbers now. Realistically, in the United States, for BRI, we tend to simply assume there's only one DN for each SPID. There's no technical impediment for you to not have 20 numbers assigned to your ISDN line, but they just simply won't in most cases.
Or can't. A lot of times they're bringing stuff out, and the switch can't even speak anything other than that because they didn't think anybody would ever want to do it, even though it's in the spec.
I found in many cases too, phone companies actually limit what they offer based on what their provisioning and billing systems are capable of billing. Because there's no reason, for example, that you can't have the phone company do an IVR menu for you. Any of the computerized switches actually support the ability to play a recording and absorb a digit and route the call based on that. So they could be running a phone switch for you and just drop you 5 lines instead of one for each handset. But they don't, because they have no way of billing it and no automated way of setting it up.
Centrex is an interesting beast, and it depends on, what I can say is it depends on the state. Even if it's one theoretical LEC, if like SBC or now AT&T, depending on the state you order Centrex in, they all have different feature sets because of the tariffs and because they, as much as they claim they're all one phone company, you've actually got something like 50 different billing systems. It's not uncommon.
It also depends on the switch. As far as doing things like assigning multiple DNs to a BRI and things like that, switches are notorious for implementing everything you could possibly imagine. The people who design the switches read the specs and say, well, this looks like fun. We'll build it in. It'll be buggy, and if nobody asks for bug fixes, it'll remain buggy, but it'll be in there. But yeah, the billing systems are really what limits what they like to sell. As far as Centrex's goes, a lot of that can depend on the actual switch that's in the area. My understanding, and I haven't done Centrex work, but my understanding is that it was put forth by Lucent, or by AT&T, or whatever they were calling themselves at the time, when they took over the ESS manufacturing from Western Electric, and said, well, let's add some features and get some brand name stuff out there. So they made this thing called Centrex, and other people's switches couldn't do it. And then the customers weren't happy with that, so they had to kind of push that out. But I think there might be some intellectual property encumbrances with some of those feature sets that are actually switch maker proprietary. I can't say for certain.
Well, I've done a lot of installations for some of my own customers I've done computer consulting for, and we have Centrex in one area where we live, and it was just like they, you know, call office to office, they just dial 4. They don't have to dial the entire, you know, prefix to suffix at that point. And then you got to hit the 9, just like a feature set on a PBX would to get out.
And with the amusing thing about the IVR thing I was mentioning, they could be charging people for more phone lines as a result of this. They could build it into their Centrex feature sets and add it as yet another thing they can charge you for. And say, oh, well, you need a phone line for every extension now instead of just one for your phone system. And they could be billing people. There are companies who will willingly pay for 8 lines into their thing for all 8 employees rather than have to worry about a phone system.
Well, that's what it was originally sold as. The original concept, and I'm just racking my brain as Nate was talking here. Centrex was also deployed because they were rolling out all these new switches at the time. They didn't want to roll out, because back in the day, when you ordered a PBX, you had to order it from Western Electric through the bell, and they dropped it in and maintained it. They got really tired of this because as they started rolling out more PBXs, the maintenance costs went up, but they couldn't raise it due to tariff. So they came up with Centrex and ran it off the switch. You can do also, and as Dave was saying, it was in all territories. Like in California, we can get an auto attendant, but you won't believe what it costs. It costs us almost less to pay a secretary at the company I work for than it is for them to do custom voice response stuff. Or not voice response stuff, but custom auto attendant and auto answer stuff. In Tennessee, you can't get it. All you can get is a Centrex phone line. Again, dial the 4 digits of the number, everything's assigned in a group, hit 9 to get out. The other thing I want to point out, phone companies love, while we're on the topic of Centrex, phone companies love to sell you Centrex because it costs more. Most PBXs these days, as long as you order ground start regular phone lines, you're fine. They're saying, oh no, if you're hooking up a PBX, you need a Centrex line. If your PBX has every feature set that the Centrex feature set's going to do, don't order it. We found when we did a cleanup last year of all of our analog lines at all of our remote sites, the company I work for, we found that we were spending on average 3 times extra that we needed to spend because these lines have been sitting around for 10, 15 years. The person who originally ordered it didn't know any better.
Wow.
Converted them all to what they call 1 NMB or just a standard loop start or turn over to G for ground. Ground start lines, and most of our costs went away. We weren't using the Centrex feature sets.
That's great. So I wonder how many organizations out there in the same boat that could, do this sort of a cleanup procedure, audit all the lines, and say, do we really need this? That would hurt the telcos, maybe my paycheck. But now I wanted to go back to the thing you said about the maintenance costs. When you have, somebody else locates a piece of equipment in your building, and then it's their job to maintain it, and it's your job to let them in. That is the big pain. It's like getting on the roof of the hotel here to install the uplink for the conference network. Took like hours of waiting for someone to materialize with a key to the roof because Jimmy Chan wasn't around. But I
didn't think about that first time.
Yeah, it's Sunday morning. But
yeah, it's Sunday morning.
Yeah, if people watching the video can't tell, we were all up late last night. Lately I've been contracting for cell companies, and 90% of the sites are out in a farmer's field somewhere or behind a hardware store in a little fenced compound or whatever. They're really easy to get to. That other 10% is an absolute pain. It takes as much time to get into as the other 90% together. Because you've got to call this guy 3 days in advance and have someone meet you at the site and then provide ID. And I'm a contractor, so I don't have ID, so I got to call the tech and have him meet me there. And then he shows up and he's like, all right, you're good, you're in. He leaves, and then I got to go get something or whatever, and things screwed up, and I got to come back, and it's another 3 days wasted. Getting access to customer or landlord sites is a royal pain. And so anything you can possibly do if you're locating equipment somewhere else, anything you can possibly do to make it manage itself, make it maintain itself, is a bonus. And these, mechanical.
So what if you do like an entire cell fail, or an entire tower fail? You sit down for 3 days until somebody lets you in.
Yeah. That's why usually in the places where you've got the cells in buildings, they're sort of downtown or in an urban environment, and there are lots of other cells packed in really densely. They're not that dense because of their reach. They're that dense because of call volumes. And so you can lose one and the neighbors will just fill in. Not very well. Obviously it was there for a reason. They're expensive to run. But out in the country, if you lose one, you might actually have a big gap in coverage because nobody else's signals reach that area. But usually downtown, when you're dealing with in-building equipment, it's not that big of an issue. And they don't fail all the way down very often. Yes?
I actually wanted a question for maybe Joe and Paul. You talked about PBX switches and how most PBX switches have capabilities equivalent to Centrex now. How would Asterisk compare to those?
Asterisk will basically, if you configure it right, Asterisk will beat most key systems functionality-wise. I'm highly suspecting, based on some of the literature that's hitting my desk for phone systems, that a lot of them are probably running a lot of Asterisk code. Nortel just came out with the BCM50. It's a completely Linux-based PBX. It's very, very little. It's on an ARM board. I'm supposed to be getting one, but based on some of the feature sets that they've been talking about, I wouldn't be surprised if Nortel said, hey, let's go run a whole bunch of Asterisk code and just integrate some of our
I've seen
stuff.
a couple of them, and the management software, I swear to God, the underlying code looks almost exactly like Asterisk. Like they sucked bits and pieces and changed it just enough to make it look like it's not it, and then came up with some proprietary crap.
Out of fairness to some of them, there are only so many ways you can encode, PCM audio.
Yeah.
But yeah, you have to wonder sometimes whether they simply, whether it was maybe it wasn't so much a conscious effort, but a lazy coder simply going, somebody's already done my work for me.
Well, and that's exactly it. The other problem is that like a lot of them are running Windows embedded OSs. Nortel, for example, because it's the platform I know best, their BCM 200 and 400s are still running Windows NT 4.0. Some of you probably heard me rant about this. We have a nightmare every time securing these things. And then all of a sudden we're finding out, and I actually kind of got confirmation last night indirectly, that they're going to be porting all of them over to Linux because they don't really want to keep going on the Windows line, and these are effectively PCs anyway. A lot of key systems I've evaluated, a lot of, when I mean key system for anybody who doesn't know, think dead stupid phone switch. It's a dead stupid PBX.
The key system comes from you pick it up and you push the line key depending on what extension you want to ring or what line you want to use.
They're usually more intercom than they are phone switch. They usually have an outboard voicemail. Though that's, again, becoming increasingly uncommon because you take apart most key systems and most small PBXs and you will find PCs inside with interface cards. This sounds amazingly like an Asterisk system. So the merger is, it's going to be about equivalent if it isn't already.
And the question would be, the question would be if you get one of these things, out of a dumpster somewhere, you tear it apart, you go to the drive, and you say, gee, look at all these nice interface cards. Can I get the drivers? Because this thing is based on Linux. Can I get the drivers off of their OS and integrate this into my own Asterisk or whatever? That's the big question. There's so much interesting telco hardware out there, and it would be great to be able to use a line module from a DMS switch or something like that, just as a FXS card for your Asterisk box. Yeah, sure. I want to serve 11,000 lines. If you just had drivers for it, it would be great.
You need like a P4 for that.
No, but that's where a lot of their work is going, and I'm suspecting that they're kind of sticking with the proprietary hardware simply to prevent the cards in these little key systems and so on from walking off, because it's hard for people to get working. But as that changes, as they realize, maybe it's not worth their while to do the proprietary approach, as more and more parts of the system get standard, we're going to see more and more of this really capable hardware on the market that you can just plug in and use. And that's going to make everybody's job a lot easier.
And a lot of the things I'm seeing too lately are, the switch deals in trunk lines, and you bring out, say, like an ad tran and break it out into actual lines, the larger stuff. So, you're not even necessarily seeing copper going all the way back to it anymore. It's simply switching high cap circuits, which have breakout devices at the end of them.
That's true.
And that's really the way it should be.
Yeah, agreed.
Couldn't you I always thought it would be cool if you could like make your own little personal telco. You'd have like your all your access boxes, and then you go up to channel banks, you go sub copper to sub homes. Could you be just like Verizon?